Happy New Year, happy February, happy everything. Flash, how you doing?
Thanks, man. Doing well. Dealing with a COVID outbreak in the household. So, update, everyone is okay. We will see how I do tomorrow, because there's just a little scratch in the throat. And I'm pretty sure that this time it's not psychosomatic. The minute my son Henrik tested positive, I think within 10 minutes I was like, do I have a headache? Is my throat sore?
Can I smell that shitty diaper?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, I knew right away. His first shit, I knew right away. I still had my smell. But woke up this morning with a bit of a scratchy throat, so we'll see. We'll see how tomorrow goes. But Henrik is fine. My lovely wife, Teresa, is fine. Had a rough go of it, but she's fine. So, yeah, that's the news over here.
Okay. Well, hopefully your supercharged vaccine-boosted immune system will just flick it off like bullets off of Batman's cape.
Yeah, we shall see. I am triple vax, triple boosted, so we'll see how that goes. The what's the other big news? I was going to say the government in the UK can't stop partying. That's the big news for you, and we got truckers taking over the capital over in Canada.
I was going to say, which I saw on the news here yesterday, but I don't fully quite get what the trucking thing is about. All I saw is there was a GoFundMe page that within like hours had millions of dollars.
This is actually, to me, this is the more concerning thing about this whole thing. If you want, I can give you a quick synopsis of it.
Go. Educate us all, Flash.
Right. So there is the federal government in Canada put in a vaccine mandate for truckers crossing the border with the U.S. So the U.S. has a similar mandate that, truckers coming in and out of the U.S. have to be vaccinated. So there's a small minority of truckers in Canada that do not like this mandate. I think the largest professional association of truck drivers in Canada came out and said that they support the mandate and that like 80 to 90% of their members are vaccinated. So these people are a small minority, as with all the anti-vax stuff. But that's how this thing started, was truckers upset that they couldn't cross the border. It morphed into this sort of larger thing for anyone with grievances against vaccines, against lockdowns, against Justin Trudeau himself. There's a lot of people in Canada that just hate the guy. And so it's kind of built into this larger thing. And then, of course, we had, I would say, cynical politicians grabbing onto this thing. Yeah. And, using it for their own gains. So members of the Conservative Party, I am none too happy with, for sort of egging this thing on. And that's what it became, is this big sort of like anyone that's mad about something, show up. And with these sort of freedom, whatever you want to call it, nebulous movements, because here's the thing is they don't really... there's no organization, really. So they did have these GoFundMe pages, and the people running these GoFundMes are, they're from these like really fringe provincial parties from my province, Alberta. So like the people that want to separate from Canada, from, that are based in Alberta, which is the dumbest idea ever. It's a landlocked province. It just doesn't make any sense. So they started these GoFundMe pages and they get all this money. But other than this, there's not really any organization. That's what I mean. It's just whoever's angry at COVID, at the Liberals, whatever, jump on board. And a lot of white supremacists and Nazis and everything else got, tied up in there, which shows you, a little bit how these, a lot of these people, well, we're not white supremacists, we're not Nazis. It's like, yeah, but... you seem to be okay hanging out with them, It's like, even if, even another protest that I don't really agree with, like an anti-abortion protest or something like that, very socially conservative movement, they do their protests, whatever. They would never allow white supremacists or Nazis to like show up and just like be part of it,
hey, but when you need to boost numbers, you need to boost numbers.
Right.
So
that's a problem, because that is an element that's there, and there's a lot of gross rhetoric that comes out of these movements. We had the same thing when Canada did their yellow vest, like they tried to latch onto the yellow vest thing, and there was a similar sort of thing. So you see a lot of like really gross rhetoric, violence towards politicians, towards media. It's become like an American thing, you know. And so this is what people in Canada were worried about. Is this going to be similar to January 6th? Are we going to see violence? Are we going to see... Thankfully, we haven't, although there's lots of reports of intimidation, bullying, that kind of thing going on from these protesters to the people that live in Ottawa, you know. Why the fuck are you wearing a mask? Take off your mask, you pussy, blah, 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 all this kind of shit, right? And some reports of violence and stuff. They've had to close down malls. A soup kitchen was getting harassed because they wanted food. So they had to close down the soup kitchen. So not great, right? Not great. And like I said, it becomes like a very American kind of... It looks very American, right? All the same rhetoric that you see on Fox News, all that stuff. Even though Fox News isn't based in Canada, we get that broadcast, right?
Some people are just born lucky, Flash.
Right, exactly. You live next door to Crazy Town. It's gonna bleed over. But this is the interesting thing that I wanted to get to, is the money, that GoFundMe page. There's some reports of people following that money trail and seeing that there's a lot of American donors, so a lot of American political groups, really? You know, funding this kind of thing. So there is this kind of nebulous network of conservative causes and conservative, you know, groups that, you know, want to push these kind of things. And so it's kind of no surprise that you see some of this money coming in. And then you also see folks like Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson talking about it on the international news. And when you think about it, the grand scheme of things, it was like an 8,000 person protest, which isn't that big. It's pretty big for Canada, but it's not that big. What's made it larger is the fact that they have these giant trucks that they've brought. So there's like, you know, 30 to 100, I think. I know that's a widespread, but something like this. I think less than 100.
Yeah, those trucks all look the same, don't they? That's the problem.
Right, exactly. Oh, you can't say that. Trucks matter too, bro. So yeah, it's become a bit of a mess. But the fact that it raised that much money is what's troubling to me. And that there's, you know, I see it as a, you know, a foreshadowing of things to come, because now the Conservative Party has just voted to get rid of their leader, who lost the last election to Justin Trudeau. But this guy was considered like kind of more of a centrist, you know, progressive, and they booted him. Right. So it looks like it looks like our main party, our main opposition party, is going the way of hard, you know, tacking to the right, to that sort of, which is not. We saw how that worked out in the States. We saw how it worked out in the UK, and it's not what I would want for Canada. But we'll see.
Well, you know it's not that serious. You know, here we don't have that problem with our government because they're too busy partying. So, you know, there's no fear of, you know, mass gatherings and far right or far left protests because they're just too busy. You know, sorry, they're working because there's wine and cheese involved. That's definitely work.
Right.
Whereas, you know, yeah, most of us when we work, we don't have wine and cheese, but, you know, we've just not reached that status in life yet, Flash. So we could all try harder.
It's the privilege of number 10 Downing Street, right?
Well, exactly. But I believe, Flash, if any of our listeners are out there and they have some sort of heart complaint, our first, and this is only our first story, even though we've been rabbiting on for 10, 15 minutes, your first story could be the saving grace for them.
It's true. And I mean, you know, we've been teasing crazy transplant stories for a while now, right? You know, and our pal in Italy just hasn't got it done with the head transplant. So we moved to, you know, not the scarecrow, but the Tin Man, someone who needs a heart. And I'm sure our listeners have probably heard about this. The actual surgery happened a couple weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago now, but the first ever pig heart transplanted into a human successful. I think it was the first time ever attempted. I don't think it was the first successful one. I think it was the first attempt, and so far successful. So, transplanting animal organs into humans. It's called xenotransplantation or xenotransplants. This is a sort of technical term for it. And it was done to I believe he was 57 years old, a man who had a terminal heart condition and basically had no other option. He was not eligible for a human heart, and they couldn't do a valve replacement. And I don't know the details as to why, but he wasn't eligible for these things. So basically they said, do you want a pig heart? Do you want to go for it? Because we'll do it. We'll try it. Now is the time. And he said, yeah. I mean, he's quoted in pieces being like, look, I knew it was a long shot. I know it's a long shot, but I want to live. So let's do this thing.
Yeah. Well, your back's against the wall. What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. And so what they did is there's a company called, let me just pull it up. I have it. United Therapeutics is the parent company, but I think there's another smaller company within there, Revivicor or something like that, that is making these organs. So basically what they have to do, the problem is not the actual heart itself, right? The pig heart is very similar in size to the human heart, and in sort of what's the word I'm thinking for?
Plumbing terms?
Well, plumbing terms, yeah, like all hearts are the same. You know, they have the same valves, they have the same chambers, all of this stuff. But the positioning of those is just at a slightly different angle or something like this, because of the way that our bodies are and pig bodies are. But the surgeons that did the operation, they were like, that's not the issue. Like, any competent cardiac surgeon can get around that. We have to make a few structural modifications, but that's not a problem. As with all transplantation, it's always the immune system, right? Like, will the body reject the organ? And I guess with the pig heart, another problem is they're worried about it continuing to grow in the human. So they put this thing in, and then the pig heart will start growing. I don't know, I guess maybe to fill the size that's there or whatever, but some kind of incompatibility in the proteins or something. They're worried that it's going to keep growing. So what they had to do was, these pig hearts have to be genetically modified. So they have a genetically modified strain of pig, species of pig, whatever you want to call it, breed of pig, that has, I think this one had like 10 gene knockouts. So they knocked out 10 different genes that would, you know, express the proteins that the human immune system would latch onto, would focus on and cause rejection. And then they added some human genes so that this growth wouldn't happen. So it had like a series of knockouts and a couple of human genes put in. And then there's still, I think you still have to take immunosuppressant drugs, things like that, right?
Right, yeah.
So that's the crux of it. They had to do this genetically modified thing, and that pig is now available. So they were able to say to this guy, hey, we have this. This company's been doing this for this purpose. You're going to be the first if you want to do it. He says yes. They go to the FDA for approval. FDA says, yeah, go for it. They do this, and as of now, he's still alive. And it seems to be working. So it's a pretty big deal in terms of organ transplant, because in doing a little research for the story, excuse me, everything that I've read like always talks about how there is such a need for organs. Like we can't keep up with, with just having regular donors or people that, sign the back of their license saying that they'll be an organ donor when they die. Like there's just not enough. I think it's something like there's a need for over 100,000 organs. Like the waiting list is like 100,000 people in the US, and like 6,000 people a year die in the US waiting for an organ. So
yeah, well, when the story broke here of was it Minnesota or Minneapolis, I think, wasn't it?
Maryland.
Surgery? Maryland, sorry. I knew it began with M, so
nobody ever remembers Maryland.
States, they blur into one.
Yeah.
When the story broke here, I was chatting to some friends, and they were like, "Oh, well, I never do that, whatever." Well, actually, we've been using valves from pigs' hearts for years.
Pig valves, very common. Yeah.
So we sort of talked about that, which was interesting. I knew that they genetically modified the pig. I wasn't sure for what reason. So it's because you went into that. I think the other thing that I'd heard was there was and with pig valves, I know they have this concern as well. They obviously take them from strains of pigs that are free of pathogens because they're worried about potential virus crossover and things.
Yeah. So these are like lab pigs. Like I don't think these pigs have ever been outside, probably, or well, I mean, maybe they go outside in their lab, whatever. But it's not just, you can't just grab any old pig, right? And when you think about the other options, like we said, just straight up donation, you got to wait for, in terms of a heart, you have to wait for someone to die, and we can't, our ability to sort of grow organs is not there yet. I think we've talked about this probably on the show before, like growing, even growing human hearts in pigs, so doing like a stem cell sort of procedure and, starting it outside and then putting it inside the body, that kind of stuff. Like this just seems like a way more efficient way to go in terms of that, and easier, just trying to grow a human heart in a pig or grow a human heart in a dish or something like it's just that we're just not there yet with the technology. Like this is like, it's a pig heart. You're getting a pig heart. You got to get over that. But
and that's the thing, is that when there are obviously religions out there and some people out there that don't believe in blood transplants or things like based on their moral beliefs or religious beliefs, whatever. And I totally respect that. And there's people out there that don't support animal testing. And again, I can get on board with that. What I've always said to those people is, they're obviously not so much now, but years gone by, there was some horrific testing done on animals that we didn't need to do. I'm glad that stopped. But ultimately, if you or one of your loved ones could be saved by a medicine that has been tested on animals or a procedure that has been tested on, do you really have the strength of character and belief to turn that down and either you or your son or daughter or loved one die? And I think that's the big one. And I think with this, it raises quite a lot of ethical questions, but ultimately, we're killing pigs in their hundreds of thousands, if not millions, every day for food. So, and in those normal pigs, we take the heart, and some people use that, as offal anyway. So, is there that ethical dilemma, or not? That's some of the discussion I've had here with people around it.
Yeah, there's a number
as they normally tuck into a bacon sandwich.
There's a number of ethical questions about this. One that was okay, let's lay them all out. There's the animal one. There was another one that came up, was that this guy had a criminal record. The guy that he was spent time in jail for stabbing somebody. I don't know the details of the case. I didn't look into it. I don't know if it was like self-defense or he stabbed the guy or whatever, but in his past he had this, and then people, some media places started bringing that up. It was like, personally, I don't think that matters. I mean, yes, you probably could have found someone else in the future that you could have done the procedure on. But it's like the timing's perfect. Like he got lucky with the timing, right? The heart was ready to go. It's all ready to go. It's this, that. It's like, who cares? And I'm not going to be the one to, judge. Well, he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve to live. It's like he went through the justice system. It's done is done.
When the media jumped on the other flip is, well, actually, maybe he deserved to be the one that was tested on.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Good point.
Okay. Yeah. He served his jail time and he's a free man, and it sounds like he's rebuilt his life and made recompense for what he's done. But yeah, the flip is, well, go and test on prisoners. That's what we should be. I've heard that argument in the past before, which I don't think is ethically sound.
No, it's a super creepy argument.
That kind of happened in Nazi era, yeah. But at the end of the day, as you said, he had a terminal illness. All the other options were shut to him. A matter of happenstance, really, isn't it? There's got this procedure. He's in the right place, right time. Let's try it.
Yeah, I agree. So there's that. That's one. And then there was an ethicist quoted in one of the pieces that I read that was talking about, like, in order to get to the place where we want to be with this technology of being able to just have these hearts available and transplant them, are we going to cause suffering along the way to get to perfect it, basically?
Right.
So it's like, is it okay to even start doing this now? And I mean, that's a question for the doctors. That's a question for the bioethicists and stuff. And obviously the FDA made the decision that we are ready. But this guy really is a canary in the coal mine in terms of, like, if in, a month or two, it just starts failing and he just dies a horrible, even more horrible death than what he would have with his terminal heart illness, they might shut down the whole thing, right? But yeah.
That's the risk, isn't it?
Yeah. So those are those, and then there is the animal question, right? And like you said, we kill and eat animals all the time. So the hardcore, animal rights people will say that's not even right. So why then start breeding animals specifically for this purpose, right? Because now this is what will happen, because they have to be genetically modified. And so again, hardcore animal rights people will already say, like, well, you're modifying these animals. That's not right. So let's kind of move away from the sort of hardcore, they're totally going to be opposed to this. Let's try and find that place where I think a lot of people are. So you eat meat, you're okay with that. But there is now, we're creating a whole new, it's not like we're just taking food pigs and taking the hearts and using them, it's not like a sustainability thing in that we're, hey, at least now we're not, no scraps are left behind. There's no waste, right? No, now we're creating a whole new line of pigs, and there's a company or researchers in Germany, so a research institution in Germany that's already started. So I guess their method is a bit simpler. They're not doing as many genetic knockouts. They think they can do it with less. So they've started breeding these pigs. They're going to do transplants into baboons. And in the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to do their human trials. So or their hearts will be ready for human trials.
Right.
But yeah, so now we're breeding a whole strain, which I guess is basically, breeding lab rats and lab animals. But if this takes off, if it works, it's not just going to be, like the small amounts of animals that are bred for animal experiments. Now, in the grand scheme of things, the small amounts of animals, it could be, organ farms. Sounds kind of fucked up, right?
It sounds sci-fi movie-esque, doesn't it, when you put it like that?
Yeah. And, maybe there's a way in the future then to just grow the heart, right? Whether it's a stem cell thing or you have some kind of incubator or something like that. But I don't think that's you're never going to replace growing it in an actual body, right? Like that's...
Yeah, and I think that it'll be interesting because I think, other options out there, artificial hearts, could we 3D print a heart? Could we culture one and grow one from stem cells in the lab? It'd be interesting, wouldn't it, if we look back in 50 years time, 20 years time, 100 years time, and we talk about this case, we might be sat here going, how archaic, what they modified a pig to grow a heart for a human, because technology and knowledge is moving on at such a rate. And will we end up with organ farms? Will we, just be able to repair hearts in situ? Where does it end? You mentioned organ farms. Will we end up having designer organs? Well, I want a bigger, beating, faster heart because I'm going to be a sprint athlete. Or where does it end? It does open up a massive ethical discussion. I think when you look at it on the surface, go, well, we breed pigs for meat. What's the difference breeding them for food? But the whole xenotransplant thing just blows wide open into what is or should or shouldn't be done.
Mm-hmm. For the record, I'm for it. I see the need for... I would take a pig heart in a second.
And that's the position I always put myself in. If I'm in that guy's position and there's no other option, what do I do? Right now, I probably would grab it with both hands.
Oink,
Sterile,
oink, I'm in.
And,
no problem. I'd be showing off that scar at parties for the rest of my life. you know?
Yeah.
But I can see another thing too of like, well, and I mean, I guess it depends on how big the global demand actually is for organs. I would have to look at the numbers, but you could say, you could probably make a sustainability argument too of like, now we have to feed more animals. Like we already have some, you know, I don't know. That's, yeah. But the final weird thought I had on this story, actually, it wasn't the final one. It's the final one we'll mention, but it was one of the first thoughts that came into my mind when I heard it was like, is this going to help shut down the illegal organ market, the black market organ, you know, black market for organs? Because we've all heard that story, right? Of tourist goes to, you know, South America or wherever in Asia and meets a nice girl. They go out drinking. He starts to feel weird. Next thing you know, wakes up in a bathtub full of ice with no kidneys. You know, we've heard that story, right? You've heard that story. Yeah. So I started looking into it because I was like...
To be fair, I've had some hangovers where I've woke up and thought I was that guy.
Yeah.
So
I started looking into it just to be like, well, okay, if you know, what is the organ trade really? Like, do we have numbers on this? Like, is there sort of a, you know...
You're not going to go undercover on me on this one, Flash, are you? This is too dangerous for us, I think. Don't be going undercover.
I'm already on the dark web. I'm out, you know, looking for organs and seeing who answers the ad, you know, just to see what happens.
Can pigs use the dark web?
Yeah. There's a pig on the other end being like, I got this great beauty for you. Oink, oink, oink. Wait, what was that? You typed oink? Yeah. No. So the little bit, like I just did a quick, you know, kind of search through it. And I found one academic paper. It's pretty old now. It's probably 10 or so years old now. But basically it was laying out that like, it's not that. The organ trade is not that story that I just told. That's not what happens. Generally, it's actually much sadder. And you, before we started recording, you mentioned, you know, that you saw some of these reports coming out of Afghanistan, where desperate people are selling their organs. And this is generally what the organ trade tends to look like, is people in poor countries that are desperate will sell a kidney or something like this, and there's a buyer for it, right? So in a way, this might be able to alleviate some of that demand, right, for organs, because that's the thing, is that there is such a demand in Western countries, you know, Canada, America, Europe, you know, everywhere. There's a demand. There's not enough organs, so that leaves people vulnerable to being victimized by like, hey, you need money, we need organs, let's make this happen. And then there's actually a whole nother debate in the ethics community about whether you should pay for organs, you know, and is that an ethical thing to do? Not in terms of like victimizing people on a black market, but just in our medical systems, should we say, hey, we'll pay you for a kidney if you want to be a donor? You know, it's same with like paying for blood donations. Some places do that, some places don't, right? So that's another, you know, kind of ethical question. The other thing I found on the organ trade, because, you know, this is another one that you always hear about, right? Is like, oh, China, they're, you know, they kill their prisoners and use the organs and stuff like that, right? You hear that shit, right? And so I was like, is that real? I actually found something from the UN Commission of Human Rights from 2021. I can't remember the exact date in 2021, but it was like a news release being like, we're very troubled about the reports that we're hearing from China of, you know, people, prisoners, usually religious minorities, being, you know, used as organ donors against their will, which is really fucked up. Something to think about when you watch the Olympics that are upcoming. That's a whole nother can of worms that we could go into.
So
but we'll save
the
that.
half pipe and suddenly you just see a load of offal come spewing down the off.
Yeah.
Then that could lose some viewers pretty rapidly.
Yeah. So yeah, interesting story from the science perspective. You know, big breakthrough.
Yeah, massive.
But yeah, a lot of weird questions that come up for.
Well, that's a nice cheery note to kick the year off with, isn't it? So,
China's selling organs. Tell everyone you know.
First come, first serve.
First come, first serve. If I disappear in the next, 24 to 48 hours, it's not because I have COVID. I can never go to China. I've said too much stuff on the internet. Like they would never let me in.
There would be all number of flags that would go off when they scanned your passport at the border.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll wait and see to see how this one plays out. And I mean, it's not going to be a fast moving story, but I will keep an eye on to see how the guy actually does, because that's the big question, right?
That's the interesting bit. And that actually, I hadn't, since the initial story broke. I think it was earlier this week. Actually, I looked to see, and I couldn't find anything either.
So
I presume no news is good news.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. So switching gears.
Okay, let me tell you, Flash, about something very topical that we may have had too much of, but let's talk about a killer virus and vaccines.
Oh, this old story?
Well, others have covered this, but I think there's some new ground here, and the way I'm going to break new ground, as we are the saviors of modern media, as we know, and we know we want to break new ground. This is a killer virus for elephants. So it's not COVID. It's actually a member of the herpes virus family. So it's
those dirty elephants.
Well, exactly. You don't just know where those trunks have been. So it's EEHV, elephant endotheliotropic herpes virus.
Sounds gross.
Is what it does. Just the name of it, doesn't it?
Sounds
it just
awful.
Sounds awful. So it was first discovered in 1990, but it was formally characterized in 1999 by researchers in Washington, D.C. It's a horrific virus for elephants. So the mortality rate is up to 85%, mostly in young elephants from about 18 months to 3 years of age. And usually once you see symptoms, it's too late. So spotted obviously a lot in captive bred elephants, because obviously that they're being health checked and monitored a lot of the time.
Right.
So usually
I think captive animals too, they might suffer from inbreeding, and that would affect the immune system as well.
And that was one of the questions I had when I was researching this. So stick a pen on that and remind me, because I will forget. So usually what they see with these elephants that are infected is they get lethargic, they start to get mouth lesions, and by that stage usually it's too late. But hopefully help is on the way. So the University of Surrey, which is in the UK, and it's not the newest vet school anymore, but it's one of the newer vet schools in the UK, is teamed up with Chester Zoo to trial a new vaccine. So Chester Zoo have lost several young Asian elephant calves recently. That could have been a fatal slip there, couldn't it? That would have blown up our Twitter feed. So they're obviously very keen to be part of the trial for this. So the virus was discovered, as I said, in 1990, characterized in 1999. And actually, it's been linked to around about 52% of deaths of Asian elephants in EU zoos since 1985.
52, wow.
Yeah. And around about 50% since 1980 in North American zoos.
Wow.
So it's actually quite widespread. But going back to your point, when I started researching this, like, well, obviously we've just screwed this up, haven't we? We've put elephants into captivity. They're not meant to be there. This virus has been detected worldwide now, across multiple zoos. It's in 9 different countries, but it's also being screened for and has been found in wild elephants. So now there's the question of, well, was this a naturally occurring virus that we brought into captivity? And as you said, then, there's been an impact on whatever, the immune system through breeding or being in captivity, that's then turned this virus into a purebred killer. Or has the virus mutated? That still isn't known, and that's
or has it gone from zoo to now the wild populations? Yeah,
right, exactly. So what they've said is actually, because it's a herpes virus, actually the herpes virus, mutates a lot. It's actually very difficult, if nigh on impossible, to actually prevent. So they basically said, look, to try and prevent infection just isn't going to be possible. So what we need to do is prevent serious disease. Now, this is where it might ring some similarities to another virus that we're all on board with at the moment. So yeah, the vaccine trials started this week, and actually, because now everyone is a vaccine expert, aren't they? So it's actually based on the scaffold, in inverted commas, of an already existing vaccine. So it's not a new mRNA vaccine or anything like that. The vaccine they've actually taken is the vaccine that is given to elephants against cowpox, because elephants apparently get cowpox. So they've found a way of just inserting proteins into this virus to hopefully trigger some sort of immune response. What I really liked about this story was when you went online, there was some little clips. The elephants at Chester Zoo are so well cared for and used to being handled or whatever. That's kind of one of the reasons, apart from the high mortality rate, that's been signed up, because they need to take blood samples and do regular health checks.
So they're comfortable with that.
They're used to it. So the clips online of, these elephants just coming up and they take the blood from the ears, so offering their ears while they get a treat and, scratch under the ear or wherever. It was amazing. So, yeah, I think just an interesting one to watch. When we talk about, viruses and vaccines, there's more than just one virus out there, and there's more than just Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and J&J vaccines out there. But yeah, the interesting question you raised is, where did the vaccine come from? Will we ever trace it back? Is it a naturally occurring virus that's mutated, or have we done something that's kicked it off?
Yeah, well, and what's the risk to wild populations, right? Like if we have bred a super virus in captivity, and it gets out into wild populations, that's an issue. Or is it that the environment of captivity makes what in wild populations isn't a big deal, makes it a big deal. But then too, like, if it is a threat to wild elephants, do we then go out and start vaccinating wild elephants? So I'm pretty sure we do that with some wild animals. I think we do vaccinate, deer in North America, I think.
We do, and I think for rabies in some countries as well, they have vaccination policies for animals. Yeah, I think it'd be an interesting one. I think for me, when I first saw it, obviously I saw killer virus and vaccine, and then discovered it was about elephants. But then exactly that, it's that bigger question of, where did it come from? Where's it going to go? And what are we going to do with it when it's there? Are essentially all animals going to end up in a zoo because that's the only place we can vaccinate them in the future? Yeah.
Yeah,
but
it's a little depressing if we've bred a killer elephant virus in captivity and then it gets loosed out onto
exactly. They're not even safe in captivity anymore, because they're not just being shot by the Tiger King, and that's Tabby Bruce just coming in. So probably heard his cat flap in the background smash through. Interesting. Well, first steps first. Let's see how the elephants at Chester do, and then we go from there. But I guess it's now part of two. It's got to be a monitoring surveillance effort in wild populations. But if the mortality rate is so high in captivity, obviously we're not seeing that in wild populations yet. So that's a good thing. Seems like we would know it by now if it was out there in the same way. Yeah, I think they were saying at Chester they've had in the last few years, I think they said they've bred 5. They've had 5 calves born, 4 of which have died.
Wow.
So a massive impact. But as you said, we're not, as far as I'm aware, we're not seeing that level of mortality out in the wild. So has this escaped from a lab in China or a zoo in Chester or wherever? It just shows what biology can do, and not always for good, but hopefully the vaccine
was it
will
a
do some
George
good
Soros funded plot to take out the elephants in captivity?
Well, watch this space. Maybe instead of Ebola, I can give an elephant virus update going forward. So
that'd probably be easier to make a sound effect for. We just get an elephant.
And what was that noise?
That was the sound of an elephant.
What with asthma?
With the herpes virus on its snout.
Oh, okay. Now I get it. It wasn't quite the roaring bugle-like trunk noise I was expecting.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you get, when you've been sticking your snout in places it shouldn't be.
Okay, well, watch this space, and there might be a EEHV update at some point in the future, and hopefully good news as well.
Sounds good. You got another one for us, right?
Yeah, another short one. We're going to move away from biology. You and I love physics. And
don't understand a lick of it, but love it.
Exactly, but we love it. So you and I, Flash. We stick together. We are like a pair of magnets, aren't we?
True.
At times. Even with hundreds, thousands of miles between us, that bond always pulls us back.
I'm pretty sure that's what
together.
The reviews of the podcast say. Is like there's some kind of magnetic energy between these two.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so let's focus on that magnetic energy. So this week, the recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering was announced.
Never heard of it.
It's also coined the Nobel Prize for Engineering.
Probably why I have never heard of it.
Well, so, the unofficial Nobel Prize for Engineering. So this year's laureate recipient is Dr. Masato Sagawa from Japan.
Nailed it.
Well, I am down with my Japanese language skills, let me tell you. So this Japanese scientist, because I'll save us all from the embarrassment of massacring his name again, he invented the neodymium iron boron magnet.
Oh, that old magnet.
Yeah, that old chestnut. So the NdFeB magnet, to give it its chemical equation name. What's that? I hear, the three people that are listening yell from a long distance 2 or 3 days in the future. Well, it's the strongest permanent magnet in wide-scale use today. It's used everywhere from cars to computers to motors. So if you have a laptop and you've got a hard disk drive in it, that's magnetic. That has one of these magnets in it. If you have an electric motor, that has a magnet in the middle. If you have a wind turbine, that has a giant magnet in the middle. So these are kind of everywhere. And they're actually saying that part of the reason that Dr. Sagawa has been given the award is because of the increasing use of magnets that we're going to see an explosion of. So they're predicting that by the middle of this decade, the magnet industry will increase to about a $20 billion industry.
Shit, buy your magnet stocks now.
Exactly, yeah. Never mind crypto, start buying magnets. Yeah. The reason behind that is really being driven by the green energy movement. So green tech, such as wind turbines,
electric motors,
electric motors and things. But actually, it's not a recent invention. So it's over 40 years old. So it was in the 80s. This breakthrough came. So up until the 80s, they used to use a samarium cobalt magnet. But cobalt is very rare. Exactly. What, my pronunciation or the magnet itself?
Yeah, samarium cobalt magnets. Who uses that anymore?
Well, exactly. So the cobalt in there is quite rare. So some very clever scientists thought, well, actually, we could maybe swap out cobalt for iron. Iron's a lot more readily available, a lot cheaper. So that was their goal. So what they first did was iron plus this neodymium. So neodymium is the third, I love this, it's the third most abundant rare earth element. So it's both abundant and rare in the same sentence.
Yeah, great bit of marketing there.
Yeah. So actually, when you put those two elements together, the iron and the neodymium, you get a magnet, and it works really well. The issue with it is when a magnet gets hot, it loses its magnetic properties.
Right. You got to keep them cooled a lot of times. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think we touched on this in one of the early shows about a super magnet, where if you chilled it down, could be like the whole levitation thing. So then what they discovered is actually if you add some boron into that, it raises what they call the Curie, as in the Curie scientist, temperature. So that's the point at which magnetic properties are lost. So the higher that temperature, the more resilient the magnet. And what that's critical for is for the use in cars and things like that, because they obviously run at high temperatures.
Well, and just I know there's some applications too where you have to have this whole super cooling system. Yeah, even when it's not in a motor, like I think MRIs and stuff like that, so they have to be like super cooled and stuff like that.
So by combining these three elements, boom, we've got a super strong magnet. So when I was researching this, it turns out that there should also be an honorable mention given. So Dr. John Croat, who's an American scientist.
Nailed
it. Thank you. Also, based at General Motors, actually. But him and Dr. Sagawa actually independently arrived at the same time, the same solution.
Which is this mix of these different elements.
This mix of the three elements. So rather than the two elements, which used cobalt, so it wasn't long-term sustainable, and also as soon as it got hot, the magnetic properties went away. And actually, I remember as a kid having magnets that, after a couple of years, they just
stopped working.
Yeah.
Shows how old you are.
Yeah.
Cobalt magnets.
That's a whole new level of insult, isn't it? That's a real science insult there.
I remember when there was cobalt magnets.
Yeah, Sumerian mix magnet you. So Dr. Croat gets an honourable mention. He's not actually sharing the Queen Elizabeth Award, which may seem a little bit harsh, although he is actually has shared some other awards, and actually there's another award later this year that they both will share. The difference between the two scientists was they discovered the same thing but through different ways, and actually the manufacturing process differs slightly from them both. So actually, and I think this is really interesting, Dr. Sagawa's process of manufacturing is actually more expensive, more difficult, more intense. But the flip side of that is that or the north side or south side, little magnetic pole joke there for those of you.
I get it.
Is you actually get a significantly stronger magnet. So that's what it's
better. You get it costs more, but it's better.
Yeah, better. So when I read that, I just thought, I'd never heard of the Queen Elizabeth Awards. Interesting. I love physics. Interesting. Magnets. Who doesn't love a magnet? The bit that really struck me, though, and I think this is where, and we've talked about this, a lot of scientists get into science because they love science, not because they're ever going to become rich or because they're ever going to become famous. It's a vocation. It's a passion, especially those doing PhDs. That's a hard slog, as you well know, sir. You need a driving force for that. What really hit me about this story is Dr. Sagawa is 78 this year. He is still working to improve this technology. So he's 78. He's won multiple awards. He's still going. And what he's actually trying to do now is add in another element called dysprosium, which is a very, very scarce element, but it's actually more heat resistant than boron and other things. And actually by adding that in, the hope is that the magnets would then become even more useful in situations where you have extreme heat. So, and they're talking now specifically about a lot of electric cars. Right. That's where they're starting to see issues with some sort of wear out in motors and things in the future because of the heat. So yeah, he's 78 and he's still working on this. And that to me was almost as credible as his discovery itself, that, this guy's just not done. He just wants to keep on improving what he's already discovered.
Scientists, really passionate about what they do, also no lives.
Or as some would say, scientists can't live with them. Can't live with them.
Boring people that have no hobbies, nothing else to do. Eggheads in the lab. I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. But I'm glad they exist.
Yeah, well, me too. The fact that we're talking via my laptop that has a hard disk rammed in it with a magnet that likely is.
And I think that's the interesting thing to, that popped up to me when we were talking about this one offline was, like all the uses of magnets, It's like when you texted me when we were going to, arranging to do the podcast, and I was like, oh yeah, I got the heart transplant story. It's going to be great, blah, 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 all this. And you're just like, I got something about magnets. I think I wrote back to you, magnets are cool. And I don't know,
exactly
I don't know if you got the sarcasm that I was putting on that. Like, it's cool, magnets.
I actually took that as you were really excited, which is why I brought the story in. But, and like in the article I was reading, or one of the articles I was reading, it was saying actually mobile phones are crammed full of magnets. Where? What are they? I'm kind of intrigued what the magnets are doing in.
Yeah.
I guess maybe with some of the near field technology or something. I don't know. So
no idea. Yeah.
They're in every walk of life, technology. So yeah. When I read it, I was like, oh, magnet. I remember having magnets as a kid, and I read how much we actually use them and rely on them. It's like, oh, okay. And as you mentioned. MRI, so I almost gave it its proper name then of NMRI, but the nuclear bit of that always scares people, so they drop the N. Good bit of marketing there.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's good on magnets, all right, and good on these guys plugging away at this. 78 years old, improving our magnets, improving the world.
Maybe he's just stuck to his desk. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe he's got a metallic belt and it's just stuck to the magnet, and he's been stuck there for the last 40 years. He really wants to go home and see his wife and kids.
It's like a real sort of Shakespearean tragedy. He built this great magnet and now he's stuck to it.
Yeah, just can't escape it.
All right. Well, I mean, I think that kind of wraps it up. I had one other thing. We're talking about heat. We're talking about physics and stuff like this. Let me just plug this real quick.
Yes,
because like every 3 years, every 5 years, we hear about, some kind of breakthrough in X technology that's going to lead to, X great thing in the world. And I guess this year is the year for some fusion news. Fusion, the great.
Ooh, so is this the year? Is this the year?
No. No, for complete fusion, no. But we are one step closer, apparently, according to the eggheads in the lab. So fusion, of course, is the process where you're actually forcing atoms together, hydrogen, I believe. Well, I think you can do it with all sorts of atoms, but we're basing this.
We'll start with
hydrogen. Wow. I think that's what the sun uses, and this is sort of the basis of. The idea of trying to build basically a mini sun that would provide us energy. And fusion, the great promise of fusion is that if you can get this reaction going, such as what happens in stars in the sun, it actually produces more energy than it takes to make it. Right, so it becomes the ultimate efficient energy source because it's giving you more than what you put in. So the only way that it works in space, in stars, is because you have extreme gravity, pressure, mass, heat, all of these things that can only sort of exist in these super dense cores of stars. So we haven't been able to make that in a machine, in a reactor on Earth. However, according to a paper in Nature that was just released in end of January, they've been able to get the plasma. So you get this, super hot plasma. You're zapping it with lasers. You're putting it in this capsule, this reaction container that's pressurized, and you're trying to recreate these, and you're trying to get it to ignite, right? So that the reaction then just starts continually going over and over and over on itself, and then producing this heat, right? So they've been able to get it to ignite is what this next step is, what this big step is. And so basically, they're zapping it with I think it was 192 lasers they're using lasers to zap this thing. And they got it to the point where the heat that it was giving off, or the energy, it was it was kind of like it was burning, it was sustaining itself. Like it wasn't a full sustainment of the thing that would like then keep building and stuff. But they reached this threshold where it's like they've never reached that before, and they were able to, you know, it started moving. Basically, I guess is the best way to put it. Like they got the embers, but they can't get the full fire. So. Okay. According to you know, the eggheads in the lab, we're one step closer, and it's only a matter of time. So check back here in 10 years, where we'll say, hey, in another 10 years we'll have fusion, just like every 10 years. But hey, wouldn't that be grand?
Well, yeah, and
solve a lot of problems.
It would solve a lot of problems, and I. Slightly realistic. I did see there's some sort of EU movement to rebadge gas and nuclear energy as is it green or renewable energy?
Yeah.
Little bit controversial, but you know, this potentially, once you get it going, this is Star Trek stuff.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and people have been talking about this forever, right? And I remember, you know, even 10, 15 years ago, there was some other breakthrough that we're closer. And I mean, this is how science goes. I don't mean to make it sound like I don't believe that this could ever work, but this is one of those things that like people have been talking about for a long time to do. And it's depending on who you talk to, it's not even possible. Like some people say it's not even, some physicists will say it's not even possible, but it seems like
some obviously think it is.
It's well, and it's, you know, I don't understand a lot of what I was reading, but the gist that I got was that they got this energy threshold. They got this sort of, you know, output out of it, where they could say, okay, it's burnt, like the reaction is burning itself, like it's not the matter is now fueling this reaction. It's not just our lasers. There's something else going on.
See, what I want to know with that bit is, you said it was 192 lasers?
192 lasers.
How did they work that out? So was there some sort of calculation? They said we need 192 lasers for this, guys. Or did they just go, stick one on? Stick another one on. I've got stick 10 on. You're like, what happens if we stick another 20 on? And do they eventually get to the point? How did they get to 192? Because that's quite a odd number just to pick.
Honestly, with my experience in the lab, I guarantee it was just like what you just said. Oh shit, we don't have enough. Get another one. We don't have enough yet. Get another one.
Running around the building, unplugging lasers and sticking it on.
Yeah, exactly. Just gathering them all up, trying to find power bars to plug them all in. You know. Yeah.
Who knows? Well, do you want me to wrap up? Quick summary of where we've been.
Let's wrap it up.
So we've discovered that truckers are worth millions. So you know, be careful who you cut up on the road, because they could have a lot of money that they're willing to
we
spread
didn't
around.
mention in that story, which we should right now. The GoFundMe page was frozen because the organizers could not provide adequate documentation of how the money was going to be spent, which apparently is
I saw it was frozen, but I didn't know why.
It's part of the terms of service and stuff with GoFundMe. Is like you actually have to lay out a plan of like, this is what we're going to do, because it's fundraising, right? Like it's not just, hey, donate money, never ask where it goes. So yeah, another angle to this story. These friggin' far right populist movements, grifters. It's all a grift. Somebody's out to make money, and somebody just made some money. So that's my opinion. Anyway.
Okay, so actually, truckers may or may not be worth millions, depending on who's siphoned off all that cash.
Exactly.
That's okay. We also learned it's slightly ironic that you eat too much bacon, too many sausages, and you might actually end up needing that pig's heart to keep you alive to end up eating more sausage and bacon. There's perpetual motion and fusion for you, right there.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Eat bacon, eat sausages, need a pig heart.
Yeah.
And the cycle continues.
I wonder if it tastes better once you have the pig heart, or if you all of a sudden don't like it.
Yeah, well, that is a science experiment that needs to be conducted.
Right. Maybe you feel guilty all of a sudden.
Well, yeah, who knows? Maybe, yeah. And then lastly, we learned you can never have enough lasers.
Lasers. Or magnets, for that matter.
Well, lasers, exactly. You can never have enough lasers or magnets. What I really want to know is, and this is pure science, they had 192 lasers. would it really fuck shit up if we did 193?
Yeah, that's too many lasers.
Would the space-time continuum just rip apart?
Yeah.
We'd eat itself and we just implode.
You know, there's one guy that's like, come on, guys. One more. Let's do one more. Sure. And they always have to be like, Jesus, Brent, calm down. We got enough lasers.
You're like Dr. Evil. A laser.
Well, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with the elephants. We'll see what happens with the lasers. We'll continue on. Thanks, Brad. Thank you to the listeners also for tuning in.
Yeah, Happy New Year to the listeners. This is our first joint show of the year, isn't it? So Happy New Year to the listeners. If you want to get in touch with the show, then at 2Brad4U on Twitter, on Instagram. If you want to get in touch with me, Brit Brad, it's at Bradley W. Hayes on the old Twitter. Flash, if they want to hit you up, or we've got WhatsApp, we've got email, you deal with that.
Yeah, at bvamperidon is me on the socials. Go to the website, 2brad4u.wordpress.com. There you will find an email address. You will also find a way to leave us voicemails if you want to leave us voicemails, which we will play on the show, as long as they're not gross. Don't leave us gross. Well, I mean, you can leave us gross. We'll listen to it and laugh, but that might not make it on air. 2brad4u.wordpress.com. That's the best way. Just go there, check everything out.
Well, Flash, thank you, as we said. It's been amazing. Listeners, thank you. And see you all. Well, we won't see you because we can't see you. That's not the way a podcast works. But I'll see you next time, Flash, and hopefully hear from some listeners in the future. So stay safe, everyone.